As we gradually count down to the May 29 inauguration, the key sectors that the President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu needs to focus on will be the major talking point. One of the sectors that needs urgent intervention will be the power sector. Without improving power generation, the strive by the incoming administration of Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu to transform the economy may be a mirage. Miles off from its need, estimated at about 60,000 megawatts, the country has a problem, even distributing the meager 7,000 megawatts it currently generates. While the country reels from inadequate power generation, it virtually struggles to distribute a paltry 4,000 megawatts with its old and antiquated equipment and power lines. Joining us on this show this morning to discuss how the President-elect can improve the power generation in Nigeria is Sonny Iroche, convener and head of the Abia League of Professionals Initiative. He will also discuss the outcome of the South African Nigerian Trade and Investment Roundtable held yesterday, April 25, at the Eko Hotel, Lagos, to commemorate South Africa's 29th independence anniversary. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Iroche.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bati. Thank you, Rufai.
Bless you, sir.
Well, today is South Africa's independence anniversary, right? April 27th.
That's correct.
But let's talk about the Trade and Investment Forum yesterday. What are the levels of trade and investment between Nigeria and South Africa, and how can we improve upon that? And, we will be talking about power, but I don't think South Africa provides a very good example for Nigeria to learn anything from with the crisis in ESCOM.
They do. There are crises and there are crises. Thank you very much, Dr. Bati. May I start by first congratulating all South Africans on their 29th independence anniversary of the Republic of South Africa. It is an independence that was fought for, lives were lost, sacrifices were made by people like Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, and the rest of them. So we stand as Democrats on the blood and on the strength of those founding fathers of the African National Congress. So congratulations, South Africans. So the round table was on trade and investment. First in the history of diplomatic relations with South Africa, was organized by the new Consul General of South Africa, Bobby Moro, and his boss, Mr. Gosok, came all the way from Pretoria. There are lots of business people, and we exchanged ideas and discussed basically the challenges and opportunities of doing business within the two countries. Nigeria being the largest economy by GDP, gross domestic product, while South Africa is the second largest economy in Africa. So we looked at the major constraints, and a recurring point there was, why are there less than 10 registered Nigerian businesses in South Africa, whereas conversely, South Africa has 126 registered big businesses in Nigeria, although we've seen a few companies exiting Nigeria market, like Game and one or two other companies have left Nigeria based on the challenges of doing business in Nigeria. So what we did in essence is, okay, fine, how do we address the visa challenges, particularly for Nigerians getting South African visas? I also belong to the Joint Ministerial Advisory Council on Trade, on Industry, Trade and Investment that was set up during the visit of President Cyril Ramaphosa to Nigeria on November 10th, 2021. It was set up between South Africa and Nigerian business people, and the council is supposed to advise the government of the two countries. The Nigerians advising the federal government, whereas the South African counterparts advise the South African government on how to do business and how to facilitate businesses within the two countries. So the boss, Mr. Goso from South Africa, the chief director in international relations, came with some good news. Although some fake video has gone viral, where they said, oh, there'll be no more visa requirement for Nigerians. That is not true. The only authorized institution to make such a pronouncement is the South African government, and they have not made that announcement. So I want to tell Nigerians to discard that video. They are working on having tenured visas, like maybe 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, just like we have with the UK government, so that you identify businessmen, people who have medical requirements, people who have educational requirements, people who have intelligence and military exchanges, so that they have tenured visas are supposed to give some people 1 week, 1 month, 3 months. Then you have high turnover of people going back and forth to your embassy. If they can identify business people, the Nigerian South African Chamber of Commerce can assist. The Joint Ministerial Advisory Council can also advise and say, these are genuine business people. And we find it interesting that some people who really don't have serious business in South Africa still get their visas. But I know that our High Commission in Pretoria does a lot to facilitate the issuance of visas to South Africans.
But why are people still having challenges getting those visas?
Well, this is work in progress that I'm telling you that we're still working on it, and that's why the Chief Director came from Pretoria to attend this roundtable to assure Nigerians that it's on the table. It's being considered that Nigerians should have tenured visas, and I tell you, and they have shown their willingness by empowering the consulate in Lagos to also issue visas. Before, it was mainly Abuja, with a little, they had to send passports to Abuja, but now what will happen is they are hoping that Lagos will start to issue visas very, very soon.
Okay, let's talk about power, which was where we started from in the introduction. Power, of course, is very important, given the value that it can add to everything. What do you think should be the main priorities for the incoming administration in Nigeria with regard to the power sector? There's a lot on the table. All that, arrangement with Siemens, all the promises about diversifying source of energy and all of that. But what do you think should be the key priorities to jumpstart this economy from that direction?
I want to believe that the President-elect, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and his team have started thinking long ago. Because before you put up yourself for presidency, you must start preparing. If you became president, what you would do. First, I believe in the fact that government is a continuum. One thing I'll give to the Buhari administration is that presidential power initiative, which they arranged with Siemens AG of Germany. I was one of those who lauded it and wrote articles about the positive approach with Siemens. But alas, we waited for it to take off. Up till today, we haven't seen improvement in power. People are tired of hearing Gencos, Transmission Company of Nigeria, and Discos. All Nigerians want is to switch on their light, and there's light. Just like the Bible says, let there be light, and there was light. So Nigerians want light, electricity from the Tinubu administration. The way to go about it first is to really study where the challenges are. One, the challenges cannot be heaped on just one part of the value chain of power. The entire gamut of the electricity market should be looked into. There is a plan that was paid for by the World Bank. Power generation, transmission, and distribution in Nigeria till 2037, prepared by Fitchner. The report is there. You don't need any, there's no other, there are no challenges that have not been ameliorated in that report. I have a copy of the report as the former executive director of finance and accounts in the Transmission Company of Nigeria, it was important to us that we knew what the challenges were. One, you cannot sell a product less than the cost of producing that product. Electricity is like any other product, and right now, the distribution companies are selling below their cost of production of power. Secondly, there is no contiguous relationship between the gas supplier, the generation companies, the transmission companies, the bulk trader, and the distribution companies. There must be synergy. There must be constant synergy. There must be constant exchange of ideas and where the challenges. I remember when Fashola came in as minister, we used to have monthly meetings of all the power players, the market operators. But I don't know if it's still happening now because I've left the power sector. But the critical things, you need to meter. If you sell a product, you must quantify it. 1 gigawatt hour of power costs this. What does it take to produce it? How much is it? So it is important that I keep stressing that we have a cost-reflective tariff. Some of my colleagues say, no, it's not only about cost-reflective, it's about this. In power, like any business, the financial part of it is very critical.
Let's talk about the grid, which a lot of people say is the problem. God knows how many times the grid has collapsed. What's wrong with the grid?
The grid, so many things lead to the grid to collapse. 1, interference, either by vegetation. 2, lack of supply of gas, because if the gas suppliers are not paid, they shut down. 3, at times, since power cannot be stored except through inverter, and inverters are only used in domestic homes, not in large. But in some other climes, you have national inverters that can store power. But for us, power cannot be stored. So if the discos are incapable of uptake of power, the National Control Center that monitors the entire grid will instruct the GENCOs to shut down. So there must be a balance. Equal amount of power generated, equal has to be distributed. So there are so many areas, there are so many points at which the grid will collapse. Now, while I was in TCA, we had 8 regional offices, but now we have 10 regional offices. I have always said, yes, you have one major national grid, but you should also empower the regional offices, operational offices, to be semi-independent of the national grid. So if, for instance, the Port Harcourt region, or Yola, or Bauchi, or Enugu decide to have a special technical intervention in their grid, so be it. If others do not want to compete with other grids, so there should be competition amongst the regions. That is, you can't over-centralize one grid. Yes, some countries have one major grid, depends on their population, but you see that in Nigeria, at best, let's say we even do 6,000 megawatts. For a population of 200, it's not enough. Whereas in South Africa, our pre-chat before the interview were like, does Nigeria have anything to learn from South Africa? Yes, South Africa has a population of 50 million, and they are doing between 49 to 50,000 megawatts of power. So per capita, they have power costs because of load shedding. That one we shouldn't beat our chest because Mama Chukwudi's trade is not doing well. Therefore, ours will not do well.
Because of corruption in ESCOM.
Well, that is another thing.
The question is South Africans are not getting the power. Simple.
They are getting more than we are getting anyway. They are. When you generate and you're able to transmit 50,000 megawatts of power, then there are problems that stop them from getting the full benefit of what they generate and transmit, which Dr. Bati has said is corruption. But I don't know. I don't work for ESCOM, but we can speculate. I think it's an issue President Cyril Ramaphosa is grappling with. He has declared an emergency in the power sector in South Africa and moved the Ministry of Power into the presidency. That is, taking the right step in the right direction for taking full charge of it, supervising it, and that is probably what I'll advise the incoming administration of President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu to do, to declare a state of emergency in the power sector and now put the power ministry under his supervision so that he sees what is going on, he gets reports, because power is so critical to our economic development. Without power, we are not going anywhere.
Well, last month, President Muhammadu Buhari assented to a bill, the Fifth Alteration Bill, yes, I think number 45 of 2023, which had the effect of devolution in the power sector. States can now generate licensed companies and distribute electricity. How much of help do you think that could be, and how soon are we going to see any difference arising from that new dispensation?
The only thing that the Buhari administration has done with the act is to say, okay, well, you don't need to get a license from the Nigerian Electricity Regulation Commission. That's all he has done. States like Rivers State under Peter Odili had the IPP, Rivers IPP, built by the state government. All they needed was to get a license, which they got. Akwa Ibom under Victor Attah also did Ibom Power. Now they now said, okay, look, we don't even have the capacity to run these things. Can federal government come and take it back? And as finance director, then I said, wait a minute. If you want to sell your power assets to the federal government, the Ministry of Power, we must appoint an independent valuator to tell us the real cost of the power plant you have built. You won't go and build a power plant with 1 billion and come and tell federal government to buy it from you for 5 billion, for instance. Just like they do in roads. I was also on the board of FEMA, Federal Road Maintenance Agency, where some states will build roads and give you some highfalutin bill for that. So what the Buhari government has done essentially is to remove the licensing procedure for states to generate. And you now see that now that it has been deregulated, how many states have the capacity to do that? I'm from Abia State, where the outgoing administration cannot even pay salaries of workers, of teachers. How would you expect such a state to go and start getting into the big high-ticket item of power? Perhaps we are trusting that the incoming administration of Alex Otti would be able to do such things. And we have people who are privately generating power and selling power in Abia State.
Okay, you talked about cost-reflective tariff.
Yes.
You talked about, MBET, the bulk purchase.
Yeah.
Concerning this new law, Lagos State even issued a statement saying now that they have a Lagos electricity market. How do you see that panning out? Because a lot of people need power, for infrastructure development through, industrialization and the likes. And thirdly, another thing that we don't keep talking about is this cost of Forex that also affects everything. And the fact that, yes, the grid has been liberalized now, states can have a great place, but the cost of foreign exchange, which everything falls back to. What would you like to say about that?
Okay, there have been serious distortion in our economy as a nation. The size of our government is too large. The demand for foreign exchange is also too high. So we are not a rich country. Nigeria is not a rich country. We have suffered in the last decades from economic strangulation. We've had inflation that we are even in stagflation today. The misery index is very high, which affects our foreign exchange. The demand, the round tripping. So what some of us advocate is to liberalize the exchange control. That way you really have people who need to purchase dollar to go after dollar. Right now, there's a lot of speculative pressure on the U.S. Currency. And I am glad that they're beginning to have talks about de-dollarization of most economies. As we speak now, about 20 countries in the world are trying to join the BRICS. That is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. I know Saudi Arabia wants to join. And it brings me to the point of the petrodollar. The petrodollar came about in 1973 when President Richard Nixon of the U.S. signed an agreement with the Saudi Prince Aziz to price crude oil in dollar. So that is what is affecting the whole world now. Now China is becoming a very strong economy. Brazil is flexing its muscle. Russia is there, and South Africa. So I don't see the reason why Nigeria will not join BRICS, and why Africa cannot think of trading amongst itself and reducing the level of poverty in Africa. If Nigeria and South Africa should collaborate, cooperate.
But Africa set up an exchange mechanism for African currencies recently.
Yes, but when the private sector is not, you can set up anything you set up. But if the private sector is not making money and the enabling environment is not there, you try and import anything to Nigeria. I tried it to import books donated to us by a UK NGO, Book Aid for Africa. And I said, I will never do it again. The frustration of getting goods into Nigeria is another thing. That's not what I've come to discuss, or what we're discussing now. But I'm just trying to give an example of why the EXIM exchange mechanism might not be working. We don't earn enough dollars, that's the truth. So if we get our electricity right, you find out that growing up in my family, you wouldn't leave light on or a fan on or anything on if we're not there. But our people are used to just living extravagant life, living lights on, air conditioners on, and then when the bills come, they're not able to pay. The market is suffering from what we call aggregate technical, commercial, and collection losses, the entire electricity market. So when you set up a business and there's electricity theft and there is loss of revenue to you, the numbers will not add up. There is no Nigerian way of flying a Boeing 747. Therefore, there is no Nigerian way of running any business. There is only the proper way. And I keep insisting on that.
Just 2 minutes to go.
Okay.
Maybe we should go back to where we started from.
Yes, okay.
Trade and investment. And it's good you mentioned intra-African trade. And you said you wanted to bring books in. I know that once upon a time you used to bring South African wines into Nigeria.
That's how bad. That's privilege of friends.
Anyway, intra-African trade, big problem. We have this regime, African Free Trade, Continental, whatever, AFTA, as it is called. What are those major impediments beyond visa? Because we just talk about, yes, developing continental trade and all of that, but we don't seem to be making much progress.
Well, we have a lot of agreements. Between Nigeria and South Africa, for instance, we have 36 agreements. AFTA talks about free movement of goods and services. That hasn't been achieved. AFTA can only trade with dollars. I cannot accept CFA, for instance, as a Nigerian businessman. Neither would they accept Naira in Ghana, for instance. So we have to sit down, the trade and investment ministers and the finance ministers and the key institutions that have to make this thing work, be serious. For instance, AFTAC is just like the Joint Ministerial Advisory Council of between Nigeria and South Africa. We have not met since November 2021 when it was inaugurated. So there is a lot of talk. It's not a lack of agreements and lack of protocols. It is lack of willingness to achieve what we've set up for ourselves as Africans. You can't imagine that the two largest economies, Nigeria and Africa, the level of trade between us is less than 5 billion. I think last time I checked was like 3.5 billion. We are trading with China, we are trading with the United Kingdom, we are trading with the United States. We are not trading enough within the African continent. We are exporting raw produce, we are exporting cocoa, and they go to Switzerland and they manufacture chocolates and beverages and sell back to us at value addition. We have to have proper economic planners for Nigeria and for Africa. It is very important.
Well, on that note, we'd like to thank you very much, Mr. Sonny Iroche, for joining us on the morning show today.